Good evening, everyone. I'm Seth Jones here at the Visual Arts Academy studio, and joining me is our master draftsman and instructor, Chad Nuss. Chad, how you doing this evening?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, and boy, does it feel good to be back on the live stream. We took a break last week, Chad, because we had an awesome, super cool, super fun Galentine's event, and that was a fun event to be a part of. What did you think about it?
Oh, I loved it. I mean, to see all the mothers and daughters getting together and paint, and then I think one of the best parts was there was a young lady there that's you highlighted her. She was doing like finger painting, doing all kinds of stuff, and as soon as you lifted it up, her face lit up. It was really amazing. So yeah, they had a great time. Yeah.
Well, it always feels good when your artwork's appreciated, right? And everybody involved just got into it, cheered her on, congratulated her for doing an amazing job. It was a fun experience. And it was exceptional to be a part of it. But boy, it's nice to be back. And guys, we are going to be here for a couple of hours, painting live with you all, answering any kind of questions, having conversations, talking about everything from art history to techniques to painting methods, what we're working on, how things are going. We're just going to have an all-around good time. So we're so glad that you're joining us. Grab your sketchbook, grab your paintbrushes, let us know you're here, ask questions. Anything and everything kind of goes here in the realm of art, and we're so glad that Chad's joining us. We'll talk, have discussions. This is really a good time to just create together, whether you're locally or whether you're abroad. We love for you to be a part of the VAAS live sessions. We're so excited to be going. Chad and I are working on some of our big pieces. I'm working on a 30 by 40 portrait here in oil painting. I've got my grisaille done, and now I'm layering my glazes down. So we're super excited to be doing some of the glaze work here. You can see there's a lot of additional color. I'll pan around here in a second to show you guys. But Chad, what are you working on? What do you have going on?
Well, I'm working on my big landscape, trying to get this, I want to say trying to get done. It's still got quite a bit. It's probably about halfway done. So I've got some more work to do on it. But yeah, I'm working up in this upper corner. My goal today is to try to get a chunk of this corner done, and then I can work down the side and then back across. So yeah, this is what I call an apocalyptic landscape. It's kind of a fantastic picture of kind of the end of the world, just trying to communicate a feeling of chaos and yeah, just really reflected what I think a lot of people feel right now in our culture. So it also has a little bit of hope. Up in the left-hand corner is some sunlight that's coming through this beautiful valley, just pointing away toward a better day. So that's kind of what I'm working on right now and hoping to get a lot of work done today.
That's awesome. I've been getting quite a bit of work done because of our class sessions. I've been doing a lot more watercolor than I've done in a while, and I've been doing some illustration work, which is really fun. I mean, I'm diving back into some illustration projects I haven't done in years because we're teaching them. And Chad, I did a little watercolor fun exercise the other day with my little giraffe rider. I made this giraffe and this guy riding it, and it was a lot of fun. And I hadn't painted that way in a while. I even pulled out the Dr. Martin's inks, some acrylic inks, and layered on top of it with my watercolors. And I think it was a blast. I think it was a lot of fun. But guys, gals, thanks for everybody jumping on. I see all of you out there. Let us know you're here. Ask us questions. Super excited for you guys to be a part of this. We're diving in. We're painting away, and we'll have some fun discussions. So thank you for joining. Thanks for asking some questions and getting involved. We love it when you guys ask questions and techniques, and hopefully you're getting your paint sets or your brushes and pencils out, and you're painting with us. Or I should say drawing, too. I don't want to just clump everybody into painters, but you know.
How dare you? There's more than just painting in this world, all right?
I know it. I guess I just use it as a general term. But well, Chad, tell us a little bit about your classes. How have your classes been going recently?
You know, it's funny that you were talking about some of the assignments and exercises that you were having the students do. And I experienced kind of the same thing in our classes. So in our comics and cartooning class, I had the students do a group assignment that they really loved. And what I did was I gave each of them a blank comic book page, or really a comic strip page with about, I think, 8 or 9 panels, and they were all empty. And so everyone got one, and their goal was, or the exercise was, everyone starts by drawing the first panel, and they can invent whatever story they want, whatever characters they want, whatever situation they want to put them in. And then everyone passes their paper to the right. So once you pass it on, then the next person, you draw in the second panel based on what the person before you put on the first panel. And then you switch again, and it goes around, like I said, 7 or 8 times or whatever. And everyone's contributing to a story. And so then at the end, we had six teenage girls in that class, and you have 6 original comic strip stories, and they loved it. And it was really awesome because it not only taught how to work with others, also taught them to be kind of creative on the fly, and to use other people's ideas, or not use other people's ideas, but have other people's ideas as we've had to really inspire their own ideas. So they loved it. They talked about it. There were ones that said that assignment was a core memory for her, just like from out of Inside Out, the movie. So awesome. I thought that was really special. So yeah, so they love doing that, and yeah, it was great. So that was one big highlight from this past week.
I absolutely love that assignment. I think it's an absolutely brilliant assignment. And I think it's a tremendous amount of fun, right? You know, like you said, to build off of each other's works and to kind of go around and get those interesting ideas. I think it's absolutely awesome.
Yeah, the really cool part is usually at the end of class, I'll have them pick something that they really, were proud of, that they worked on during the class, and I'll put it on their desk, and everyone walks around and looks at everyone else's artwork. And the girls in that class are so encouraging for one another. Like they're always excited to see what everyone else is working on. There's never any kind of like rivalry, not even like playful rivalry. Like they just really enjoy each other, and they encourage each other in what they're doing. And it's really an amazing class. So yeah, it's been really good this week. Well, the last couple of weeks has been really good.
That's awesome. Well,
we in that same class, we also did. It was kind of challenging. I had some established comic strips, so I think there was like Fieldmore, Calvin and Hobbes, and there's one more. I can't think of what it was, but there were only like 3-panel, 4-panel comic strips, and I covered up the last panel on purpose, and I had them fill it in. Like, how would they have finished the comic strip? And it was really funny because some of them got kind of close to what they, Bill Watterson or Jim Davis did to their comics. So it was really fun to see the way they processed and how the creativity to come up with like a punchline for the strip was a really cool exercise too.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, for everybody that always asks, do you guys ever mess up? I have just done a massive mess up and error on this beautiful painting. We knew it was going to come. We knew it was going to happen. But guys, I have really I was not patient enough. I did not let my layers set. And if you guys can see it down here, I don't know if you guys can see it or not, but it has pulled up this entire, in fact, let me show you guys, because we do this a lot. And trust me, this is embarrassing, and I'm not a fan, but you can see it has pulled up a ton of that painting. I was not patient enough. I was getting excited and went to add on an additional layer, and my previous layer was not dry enough. And so what it's done is it has pulled up that under layer. So this is where, a lot of people that are acrylic painters are like, well, if you were painting in acrylics, that wouldn't happen. You're right. That wouldn't have happened. That would have been perfectly fine. But what I've done is I've overworked this area here, and it has pulled up the under layer because I wasn't patient enough. And so that's a perfect example. Say that again.
I was going to say, what do you do in that situation?
Well, so I need to be patient. I'm going to put another layer on, let it soak, let it dry, and then I have to come back and build in additional layers. And so then you've got to have even more patience, right? Which, that's a struggle for me. I want to work quick, but this whole section, I'm going to have to come back in. You guys can kind of see that. You see that strip there?
Yeah.
That whole strip has pulled up. And so now I've got to be patient, and I'll have to build back some layers. And so this is going to be a challenge for me because it looks beautiful over here. Look at this.
Yeah, that's nice.
Right?
Yeah.
And then this so it's a little orangish here, but look at that top right layer.
Yeah.
So that's really nice, but it's clearly not dry enough, guys. So when it's not dry enough, this is what happens.
So upper right corner where it's a little more red, did you just add that another glaze to that to make it a little more red?
Yeah. Yes. So you can see the difference between this section and this section, right?
Yeah.
And I think the right looks significantly better. But what's funny is this section was more dry than down here. And so and you can see there's actually a spot right here. Let's see if you can see that.
Yeah, I see it.
See that? And right there, it's starting to pull up. And I should have stopped. I should have had myself go, It's not dry enough. And I kept working because I was eager and excited to be here on the live stream. I'm sitting there going, oh, no, it's good, it's good. And I pulled it up. So now I'm going to have to put an additional layer on, let that sit, and then come back to it later, which is fine because I have all these other sections of this painting that I can work on, which is what I should have been doing, right, Chad? I should have been working on those other areas. And instead, I got super excited. I wanted to see it come to fruition. And so I didn't quite have the patience I should have had. And so now I'm going to have to go back in and clean it up and fix it, which is a shame. But like Chad and I always talk about, guys and gals, things happen, right? Things happen. And so you got to know, you got to go, okay, I can do it again. I can fix it. I can come back. I can work on it. And I will resolve the challenge that occurred. But some people, what happens a lot of times, Chad, is people get really frustrated, right?
Yeah.
And then they go, oh, that's it. The painting's ruined. It's over. You can't get that way. You can't let it defeat you, right? If you listen to some of our live streams, not too long ago, Chad was talking about perseverance, right, Chad?
Yeah. That's
and
exactly right.
This is a case where, boy, I'm pretty devastated. I'm not going to lie, guys. If any of you guys know me, I'm pretty devastated with this right now because I was really trying not to mess this painting up. And I've made a mistake, but that's okay. Mistakes happen. It's going to be all right. In fact, I guarantee you that I'll come back and this will end up being somewhat better than when it was before. If I persevere, if I continue forward.
I have an interesting question for you then.
Yes.
Kind of in this vein. So for the person, artists that are really nervous about making a mistake, we often say there's really nothing that you can't recover from. Like most everything you can fix. Can you think of a time in which you can't fix it? Like what is the unforgivable mistake in art, do you think, in your opinion?
Man, that's a great question. I think there are technique mistakes that you can't come back from in cases, right? So like a good example with oil painting is working, the opposite of how you're supposed to work as far as, thick over thin or lean over fat, right? Or fat over lean, because that can ruin the painting. The painting itself can fall apart, right? The painting cannot dry appropriately and it can fall apart. Or a good example would be in watercolor. Like if you want to leave a super white area and you're working in pure watercolor, you can't paint the whole paper color, right? You have to leave some white there in order for it to be your whitest white. Now you can use a masking fluid, you can use a resist, you could do all kinds of different things to maintain that white. But in true watercolor, your white isn't opaque enough to be on top of dark layers. You could go back in with acrylics and other things like that, and that's fine. But it's not a true watercolor at that point. It's kind of a mixed media. You know what I mean? So there are cases specifically in watercolor, Chad. I think that's the easiest one to tell, where if you put too much pigment down and it becomes muddy, you can't come back from it. Once you go super dark with your values, it's hard to come light again. That's a case where I think you can't bounce back from it.
Then at that point, you change the composition by cutting that out, literally.
That's right.
Or starting over. Yeah.
That's correct. Yep. But again, I still think, and I teach all of our watercolor students, that it's still a win. You still learn something from that painting, and your next one's going to be significantly better because of that, right? So don't count it as a loss. Count it as a learning experience.
Yeah.
We've got a great question over here, Chad. What is your favorite medium to work with, and which medium do you think is easiest? Oh.
Yeah. So first, you want to go?
Well, do you want to take that one, or you want me to take it?
Well, let's we can both do it. Why don't you go first, and then I'll go.
So I guess it depends on, if you're clumping in all mediums or just the basic mediums, right? Because there are some mediums out there that I think are incredibly challenging. I think the easiest one, in my opinion, is anything that is just kind of straight black and white. And I'll explain why. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings here.
How dare you? How dare you?
Because at that point, you're only working in value. You're not worried about chroma. You're not worried about color. And so you've eliminated a major component that is challenging for many artists, right? You've eliminated chroma and color. And I think it's also but it's incredibly valuable because you have to understand values. If you eliminate values, you have nothing. You have all black or you have all white. And so if you don't understand how to work in value, lights, darks, tints, shades, and tones, then you're not going to get form or shape or distinction. And so I think it's the easiest because you've eliminated chroma or color, but I think it's also one of the most important because it's the foundation of most of all the other mediums and techniques. If you're taking out just like, drawing or graphite or something like that, I think acrylic is one of the easier ones to gain a strong basis for, but can be one of the hardest to master because it's so versatile, right? So to that person that asked a question, Eliana, I think that it just depends, and everybody has different sensitivities. Some people think watercolor is super easy. I think watercolor and gouache are two of the most difficult and challenging mediums out there in existence because I don't think they're very forgiving. Once it's down, it's down. And so I think that's kind of one of those things. But I think anything that is, and I think graphite tends to be the easier one. Charcoal is a little bit harder, but I think it just depends on the person and their sensitivities. I've seen people that can paint and they don't think anything of it, and then they pick up a pencil, Chad, and they're like, I can't do this. This is the hardest medium ever, right? So I think that's more of a personal question, Eliana, rather than a blanket statement.
I would definitely agree. It's a personal preference. Yeah, I think for me personally, my favorite, at least right now, is definitely charcoal, just because it forces me to be much more expressive as an artist. Graphite is what I've always used, and I tend to be very tight when I draw with graphite, and there is some advantages to that. For example, like the other night on Thursdays, we have an open studio figure drawing night, and I used graphite that night. Normally I use charcoal because it lets me loosen up. Yep. But I decided to go back to graphite because I wanted to do some drawings a little bit tighter, more focused on detail. And I really, really enjoy that. And so, I'll split between the two. That's why I really enjoy working on this one. I'm doing both charcoal and graphite in the same drawing. But I do love the painterly aspect of charcoal, that you can literally put it on with a brush or literally put it on with a sponge and then just move it around and smudge it. And your details don't have to be exactly right. It's more about the impression of the subject, in my opinion. How with charcoal, you can get super tight. Like I've seen some charcoal drawings that look photographic. So I'm not saying that charcoal as a whole you can't use in a precise way. I'm just saying for me, the charcoal it loosens me up. It makes me think of drawing as painting, really, because I'm putting things down. I'm thinking more in tone. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, because I think in tone and graphite as well. I think it's just the looseness of it that I enjoy with charcoal, for me personally. And someone asked me the other day, they're like, why do you only, like, why don't you paint or do color and everything? And I gave them kind of a two-part answer. I said, on one part, I could get better at drawing or at painting. I could, really devote time to that. But I said, the reality is I'll be 49 this year. And not that that's like super old, but the reality is for me to get as good at painting as I am at drawing will take years and years and years. So I sit there and I think, do I want to invest the next 30 years to becoming an adequate painter, or do I want to spend the next 30 years of my life becoming an extraordinarily exceptional draftsman? And I kind of like the latter rather than the former. I'm kind of the school that you pick something that you're really good at and dive all your energy into that, become the absolute best you can at that medium. Now, that's not to say that I'm never going to paint anything in the next 30 plus years or however long I'm alive. That's not to say that I'm not going to do color works. I'm not going to do pastels. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that the majority of my time, I feel like, is spent getting better at something that I feel that I've got a pretty good handle on, and even getting that much better. Yep. I think, how amazing would it be to have spent 50 years using graphite and charcoal and becoming that good at it, rather than 20 years at this, 20 years at that, 20 years at this other thing, which, you know, in 20 years time, you can pretty much master a medium. I'm not against that, but I just say it's kind of like the difference between cross country and track and field. You know, you can either spend your time in cross country and like run marathons and run long distances, or you can be someone that gets involved in track. They're good at shot put and they're good at the long jump and they're good at, you know, a bunch of different things. And for me, I'm more of a cross country type artist. The pencil and graphite or graphite and charcoal are just my long distance. That's the one that I gravitate towards. Now, I will admit, I agree with Seth that black and white is easier than color because of exactly what he said. All you're dealing with is different, but there is a sense in which it is easier in the sense that with color, you're not just dealing with the tone, you're also dealing with how the tone affects color and how those colors then combine. So it's much more complex, in my opinion, and I think you would agree, because there's so many more variables to play. And so I have a huge amount of respect for painters that can communicate through paint in a way that you just can't touch with graphite. So so that's a long-winded answer just to say that charcoal is definitely my favorite, graphite is definitely my favorite, but I'm open to other mediums as well. So.
Well, I think it's funny. You were talking about like kind of getting to a stage in life. You know, it's funny you say that because, you know, I've always wanted to learn the guitar, like always wanted to learn the guitar. And I'm like, well, it's not too late. I'm still, I still have time. I could do it. And you're right. I could absolutely dive in, right? And dedicate that time. But I often find myself going, yes, but that would take away from my time of getting even better as an artist. That would take away from my time of getting better as a writer. You know, the things that I really have spent time in and really am passionate about. And so, you know, you kind of get to a point where you go, okay, what do I want to be a master of? And what does that look like? What does the commitment look like from that? And what am I willing to sacrifice for something else? And I think, you know, for you and I both at this stage, we have an idea of what we thoroughly enjoy doing. You know, that's part of it too, guys, is you gotta enjoy what you're doing also, right? You don't want to just be doing something that you're like, I guess I'm going to be doing this, right? I guess I'm going to keep drawing. You know, I don't think that's the goal either. But I think, you know, if you enjoy what you're doing and you want to progress at it, you know that it's going to take time. Time is finite. And so, you know, I think you push to become better. And I think there's a lot of truth in that, right? Like, could I switch over to something else? Or do I continue to master the medium that I thoroughly enjoy and know that I can continue to progress at?
Yeah, and often when I get online, like I'll look at other artists, particularly people that use charcoal pencil, and when I see the level of some artists out there and just realize like I still have so much to learn and so far to grow as an artist, it really helps that practical question, because I'm like, well, do I want to get better? Well, I've got to put in the time. And the reality is you only have 24 hours a day. And so that is done sleeping and eating and taking care of practical stuff. So the rest of it, you know, you've got to make a decision. Do I want to get better at what I'm already, you know, have a handle on? Or do I, you know, would that time be better spent elsewhere? And for me personally, I would really enjoy getting better at pencil. And the other thing too, and this is probably kind of like a personal opinion, but you don't see as many pencil or graphite and charcoal masters that are just like blow you away. Most people associate art with painting, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because like I said before, I think painters have a skill that's beyond what I can do. But I kind of like the uniqueness of I spend my time doing graphite. Not many people do that, and I love that about that. That's I guess artistic personality. You always want to be a bit unique, and so that's kind of how I view pencil and graphite.
I think that's part of your artistic voice. You know what I mean? Like I think that's part of that. You know, your conscious decision to be a certain voice, you know, or method of drawing, and I think that's really neat, right? You know what makes you happy and what you enjoy doing and what your mastery level is, and I think that's great.
Yeah. I mean, I absolutely love watching, especially like reels, or I'll see stuff online of like these old masters doing like figure drawing or portraits in pencil and charcoal, and just something so beautiful about that. And don't get me wrong, a painting, a portrait is amazing, but there's just something like almost, in my opinion, almost like ethereal about a portrait that's done. It's so soft. You see all the shadows and everything. It's just, I guess it gets back to that personal preference. Like I just love the look of charcoal and pencil. So that's why I want it, because I love it so much. And it's not that I don't have a desire to paint or, use color. From time to time I will do painting or I will work in pastel or whatever. But the main drive of my artistic life is trying to capture that on with pencil and graphite. Or I keep saying pencil and graphite. I mean graphite and charcoal. So yeah.
Yep. I'm not gonna lie, I'm still reeling from my big mess up. Oh man, it is throwing me for a loop. Now I'm terrified of like messing up everything else. And so I'm being super hesitant. And that's not a good way to be. It's funny, I teach my students to just go for it, right? Don't be hesitant, trust yourself, trust the process, go out for it. And it's funny because I'm now painting with hesitancy. And it's because of that mistake, which again, I know that mistakes happen. I know that they're all gonna, mistakes occur. But boy, Chad, it has thrown me for a loop. I'm over here not having the confidence in my brushwork that I should have. And it's definitely affecting my painting today. And so I've got to figure out, we talk a lot about like techniques and stuff and, how do you do this? How do you do that? And guys, I've just got to work through it. I believe you got to work through it. I believe you got to get to that next golf shot, right? Like you got to get to that next thing to where you go, okay, you know what? I actually like it now. And so I've switched it up and I'm going back into the shirt up here. And I'm hoping that I can maybe pull some of this and change this up a little bit and maybe have some confidence boosting back, because I really messed that up and it's really hurting my confidence here in this painting.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. Whenever you face that, sometimes it's good just to work on a different area, gives you a fresh eye, or even so far as to work on a different piece. I mean, I know you're not in that position right now, but like,
I agree with that. Step away from it.
Just in general, just maybe start the new whatever, step away from it for a little while or whatever. But yeah, I totally understand how you feel. Like I've done drawing where I walk away and I'm like, it's just not right. And as soon as I leave, like that's all I think about until I get back to it. And I'll sit there even like, we'll be sitting there at home and, wife and kids are doing something. And I'm staring off into space thinking about this stinking artwork and figure out how am I going to fix this? And there'll even be times, especially if I got artwork at home, that it's that way. We'll be having dinner or doing something or whatever as a family. And I'll be thinking about it. And as soon as I get a minute away, I'll go mess with it a little bit, just until I'm like get it to a point where I'm like, okay, I've fixed it. So I totally get what you're saying. I totally understand that feeling.
Yeah, man. And I'm just, maybe I do need to switch over to something else, because guys, if you're watching and enjoying, this is, I made a pretty big mistake on not being patient. I'm struggling with it, to be quite honest. I'm dealing with it a little bit. I'm trying to work through, but it is not being my friend at this moment. And I'm trying to figure out if I should just completely step away, if I should keep working it, keep progressing, trying to power through it, or what. But it's thrown me for a loop pretty good, and I'm going to keep seeing if I can push it. I'm going to see if I can keep working there, and maybe work on some spots here in a second, change it up a little bit, and see what I can get going. But it has thrown me for a loop for sure.
You know what the silver lining is here, which I'm always here to bring that to you. You're welcome.
That is true.
Is that anyone that's looking at that that's not you is probably not going to even notice that, because we're looking at it like, well, it's not done yet. So like that floor is not done. It'd be different if it was completely done and you're like, oh, my last little thing I'm going to do. And then you did that and you're like, oh no, I've got to rework this whole floor or whatever, So I think for me, that helps me when I think about something I messed up and I don't want to see it, or I just can't, I'm just so bothered by it or whatever. I just remind myself it's not done yet. So I'm going to go back to it. I'll fix it. It'll be fine. It's
That's
kind of
good
like,
wisdom.
yeah, like in this drawing, like I was working on this mountain scene or whatever, and this mountain that where it is right now is not where it started. I had like rendered a whole nother mountain, and when I kept coming back, I was like, it's just not sitting in the right place. And so I ended up erasing it and moving it over, and now I love where it is. So, but at the time, I was not happy. Every time I looked at it, I was like, something not right. And then you eventually just keep working it and you fix it. So,
Yep. I think, something we talk about this a lot too, and I know that I have a number of students that do the same thing. And it's funny, I'm falling into it today, which is you create your own expectations, right? And, I had this expectation of, okay, I'm not going to mess this up. I'm not going to make this or that. And what's funny is almost when you get to that point, that's almost kind of, I feel like when it's bound to happen, you know what I mean? Like if you're pushing that and you're like, okay, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. Don't do that. Don't do this. All of a sudden it's almost like, well, then it is going to happen because you're manifesting it, right? You're creating that mess up in your head. And it's funny. I look back on how we sat down to start this, and we missed last week, and I'm sitting here going, boy, I think I did sit down with that kind of energy, and this is the result of what happened, right? And so we're getting there. These colors on this sweater are starting to pop a little bit. You guys can see the difference here. If you look on this left-hand side, it's still a little gray, but I've got some of my bright pinks coming. This is a bright pink sweater that she has on, and so it's getting where I want it to be. It's starting to grow, starting to pop a little bit more with chroma, a little bit more color, and we'll see kind of what happens with it. But I'm pushing these layers, doing these oil layers and these glazes, and it's starting to come together. So I just need to make sure I'm patient, let each layer dry, continue to add on to it, and we'll see some good things happen if I can be patient. It is really nice and rewarding when you get to use a painting like this as an example for your students. Or at least for me, it is. I really enjoy it when the students get to see, not just a demo, right? You know what I mean, Chad? Like I get to actually use it as an example of, hey, here's how we're glazing, here's how we're layering, here's how we're building the color, all that stuff. I really do enjoy getting to use an actual piece. I think you probably feel the same way for a lot of your drawing classes, because sometimes when you do a demo, it's like, this is a practice, right? Which is good. We want to practice. But when you can actually showcase a piece that you're actually working on and using those skills, I think they get to see it come to life. The technique, that is, the technique or the skill, they get to see it come to life in a different way rather than just doing like a demo.
Yeah. Sometimes I sit there and think, as I'm developing classes or curriculum and teaching material, like there's so many times I'm like, I wish I finished drawing for this, to show them. And the times that I do have it, it's so helpful because then you're like, this is what I'm taught. This is what I want it to look like. This is, yep. And you can explain how you got there. Sometimes when you do a demo in front of them, it's good. It's helpful. They definitely benefit from it. But sometimes, if we had to be honest, sometimes you don't hit it well. Like you're making a drawing and it just doesn't come out that you're trying to explain. Whereas if you have one that's finished, it can be really useful to say, this is the end product that I want you to do. It's like with foreshortening. Like when you're drawing, foreshortening is so difficult. And students often want a demonstration. Like, well, show me how you did that, And you sit there and you're doing it. You're like, well, it's kind of like this. Like, this is just a fast sketch. It's not the best sketch I've ever done. You start trying to justify. But then you get to explain, like, this is really hard. Like, even myself, I've done this like 100 times. I still trip up. So having a finished piece that you can show or a piece that you're working on in the studio is definitely really helpful teaching, sure.
Well, and I think to your point, there's a lot of pressure to be able to execute a demo live. And some demos are easier than others. And, and that's one thing, but then some demos are really, really tough. And especially when you don't want the entire lesson to be you demoing, because you want them to work on their work. You want them to get in there and get going. And so I think that's a challenge, but and this piece is a piece that's been pushing me. You helped motivate me to do it and encourage me to do it and to push myself. And so I knew that this was going to be a challenge, right? I knew that this wasn't going to be something that was going to be super easy. This was going to be something that's outside of my standard exercises and how I paint typically. So I've got to give myself some grace there too, and go, yep. And you hear me say this to a lot of our students, right? How long have you been painting? How long have you done this technique? And you got to keep that in mind too. So is this something that I can come back to and fix? Yes, it is. So ultimately, there is no loss, right? If anything, the next time I go to that next painting, right? The next time I go to do a grisaille this large or this big with this many layers and this many glazes, I'm going to remember patience, right? And slow down, because I know that this is going to give me the result I want, but I need to slow down, be patient, and that's going to give me the ultimate reward. And I will absolutely remember this moment and go, not going to do that again, right?
Yep. Yeah. And
that's part of the learning process.
You were saying about pressure of doing a demo. It's so funny because I've created tons of like characters in sketchbooks or for my graphic novels or whatever. And today in class we're talking about antagonists. And one of the exercises I had them do was we looked at some pictures of very famous protagonist antagonist couples, and this is a teenager class talking about character design, so I often go to Disney because Disney has a lot of really nice examples. And so I was showing like Buzz Lightyear and Zurg, or I showed Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. It's not a Disney animated film, get what I'm saying. Or I used Marlin from Finding Nemo and Bruce the shark, and we looked at the design, the physical design, like the visual design, and you could tell the protagonist and the antagonist just by looking at them. And I had them talk about like what are some of the characteristics. Typically antagonists are darker, more angular, more threatening looking, bigger, taller, whatever it is in comparison to the protagonist. So the exercise I had them do, I said, okay, what I want you to do is come up with your own new protagonist and then also draw the antagonist, but don't tell us which one's which, so that we can guess just by looking at them which one's the protagonist and which was the antagonist. So I sat down to do the drawing as well. And I was like, what am I doing here? I feel like I've never picked up a pencil in my life. Like I was just, and I was like, well, thankfully I don't have to show this. I'm the teacher. So
right.
If it doesn't turn out, I'll just be like, let's look at ours. But I kept working at it, but it still was not the best drawing I've ever done in my life. And it was very generic. I just did a knight and a dragon. And I was like, well, it illustrates the point well to them because most people can identify, the knight is the protagonist, the dragon is the antagonist. But just to your point, like you do a demo and sometimes like there's so much pressure to write. And the nice thing about having finished drawings is I worked on this. I took hours of it and thought through this and was able to produce something that I want you guys to produce. That sometimes you can almost betray your teaching because the drawing doesn't come as good as you'd hoped or planned. So, yeah.
Well, and one of the things I think is always interesting is even when you're a teacher and you're fully prepared and you feel really confident, it's interesting because a lot of times you catch yourself, either overemphasizing the things that you want them to know or underutilizing it sometimes, right? So you give pointers like, oh, you got to do this, and then you go and do it yourself, and you're like, actually, that's maybe a little bit less than I thought, or you catch yourself not doing what you're telling them to try to achieve, right? Like, oh yeah, well, maybe I should do that more on my own. I should do more of that in my own work. And one of those examples was today we were doing a lesson in drawing, and I was teaching about the importance of thumbnails, right? Like how good are thumbnails? And, little sketches, quick sketches for layouts and composition and for ideas and just to get ideas out and down and all that kind of stuff. And I realized, I'm like, boy, I haven't really worked in thumbnails as deeply as I should for a while. I because of time, I always think, I don't have enough time. I'm just going to dive into the drawing or the comic or something. And what's funny is I realized, and I told the students, I said, you will find that after you get really good at thumbnails, you will actually end up working faster because you solved a lot of your early challenges in this idea of a thumbnail, right? And then I'm sitting there going, dang it, Seth, you just told on yourself, right? Like a lot of the challenges that you run into, you will solve if you start utilizing your thumbnails like you tell your students to.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because the thing I'm always telling my students, especially for drawing, like usually when people start drawing, they dive right into a contour drawing. So they'll look at a part of the whatever they're drawing and just start with the outline and then just follow it all the way around. And then later they'll go back and they'll start shading it and everything. So they've got this heavy line that they're trying to shade around. And so I always tell them, like, there's a relationship between line, shape, form, and then eventually texture. And I always say most people start with line and work their way to form. I said, but you actually have to do it in reverse. You actually start with form, and then you build up your tones. And then when you have tones next to each other, then you start defining your lines. But I catch myself all the time. Like I'll be drawing something, I'll do the shape or the general form of everything, and I'll start going in trying to like define the line, the contour lines. And I catch myself doing the very thing I'm teaching my students not to do.
Yep.
But it's to your point, like when you've done it for long enough, sometimes you break your own rules just because you know you can skip over some steps just because you've done it enough. But yeah, it is so funny how many times you are almost a bit of a hypocrite when you teach sometimes. So.
Absolutely. Well, guys and gals, give us some questions. Let us know what you're thinking. How do you guys like the paintings and elements so far? Everything's going good, I hope. I'm trying to overcome this massive mess that I've created down here on the bottom of this floor. We'll see if I can overcome it and get it back up. I've been adding some of these values on this shirt here. I'm trying to decide whether or not I like the look of it or not. And I'm struggling a little bit with it. So part of me feels like, man, you know what? I just need to switch it up. But I'm going to keep powering through it. I'm going to see what we've got, see if I can kind of come to terms with it and work my way through it. And we'll see how that works. But let us know you're here. Ask us some questions. We've been really excited. We've had a phenomenal, we're about halfway through our 8 weeks here at the Visual Arts Academy and Studio. And boy, it's just been a phenomenal 8 weeks. We've got some amazing students doing some amazing work. Our next round of sessions are open. They start March 10th and go through May 10th. And we would love to see you guys here.
You were talking about mistakes and those kind of things. It's interesting. The one challenge that I'm running into is that I started this drawing with straight graphite, and my intent was to do the whole thing in pencil. But then I got into that same rut that I've been in before, where when you're using especially the B grade pencils, you get that shine or that sheen over areas. And I really wanted to avoid that. And the best way to avoid that, in my opinion, is to use charcoal because it's very matte and you can get very dark darks. And so I switched over to start incorporating some charcoal. And now pretty much 90 or 85% of it is now charcoal. But the other issue is, like, as I'm doing these rocks mount over here, it's very much more expressive than when I first started. So it's almost like done in two different styles. I'm looking at this, and it's very refined, and I'm looking at these rocks and boulders over here, and it's much looser. And so I'm sitting here trying to make a decision. Do I just continue going loose and then go back in with more detail to tighten it up a bit? Or do I switch back to graphite? I think what I'm probably going to land on is a combination of both, where I use the charcoal in a very loose way and then come back in with some graphite and tighten some areas up just to give it consistency throughout the whole piece. But yeah, it's interesting. I've never really faced that, having a drawing that you're working on it, and it's in two different styles, I guess you could say. So.
Well, I think you'll find a way to combine them, right? You'll have them kind of meet. And I think that, you may not have that solution right away, but I think you will ultimately find a way to have those kind of combine and meet and be unified, right? But I think that, if you if you were to step away from it and see it with fresh eyes, like most viewers, you're not going to think that it's not consistent enough. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes we as artists get too close to our own work, and we don't see it the way that everybody else does.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, sometimes if I, step away because, we won't be here tomorrow and we're back here Monday and having a whole day off, and I come back in, I'm like, oh yeah, like, the things that bothered you when you were or not bothered you, but the things that stood out to you before, you come back in with fresh eyes. You're like, oh yeah, it's not as glaring or not as distracting as I thought it was.
Yep. Well, I'm going to have to adjust because I'm going to have to change my setup here a little bit because I am not uber happy with how my painting is going, guys. So it's okay. Like Chad and I said, we're going to switch it up. I'm actually going to move entirely. I'm going to stop sitting, and I'm going to change up my posture and my setup and just about everything so that I can shift this around, try to get back into the flow of it here and see what I can get going. Because with the classes and everything, I don't get to paint as much as I'd like, right? Chad, you and I talked about how this 2 hours is a 2 hours that you and I both love. We absolutely love it because it's something that we get to invest a lot of time in on our personal work, which also allows us to refine our skills, which I think is incredibly important, to constantly be on top of our skills and, be there and do all that kind of fun stuff, if you will. But I also think it's something that I like to take advantage of. I like to get in here and paint. So I'm going to power through this, find a solution, and really make it happen. Hopefully find some good stuff and make it positive. But it is hard sometimes, guys. Let's see what we can do here. And if you're in the Louisville area, boy, we are getting some rain. It was just coming down like crazy. I still think it's better than the snow that we had, even though I like a good rainstorm. I think you do as well, Chad. I like a good rainstorm, but it sure does make for a different environment than what we've been having with all this snow.
What is your favorite subject to draw or paint?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I've always really enjoyed animals. Like I've always really enjoyed animals, and I continue to enjoy doing animals. But I've recently done. I enjoy painting figures now lately with my daughters, and I've really enjoyed this more than I thought I would, to be completely honest. I didn't know I would enjoy doing figurative work as much as I currently am, but it's been a blast. It's been a challenge, and I think that's why I've enjoyed it. I don't think I'm very good at it, right? I think this is something that I'm growing in, and I shouldn't say I'm not very good at it. I understand that this isn't an ugly painting by any means, but I don't think it's not something I would have been like, oh yeah, that's my first choice, right? Of strength and skill set. And so I really enjoy pushing myself and trying something different. So even though I messed up some of the technique here, the subject matter has been a joy to do, right? It's been a pleasant surprise to come in and change some of this up and try some different things and see what I can do with it. So I'm really trying to take it for what it is and enjoy the change of subject matter. But I've always enjoyed doing animals, whether it was drawing or painting animals. For some reason, I've always just liked, drawn that as a subject. What about you?
I'm gonna probably say figure drawing is definitely my favorite. Although I am enjoying doing this landscape. I've not done a ton of landscapes, but I've done a few here in the last year, and I have enjoyed doing landscapes. But figure drawing is definitely my favorite, for sure.
Well, the good thing about figure drawing, Chad, is we have drop-in drawing sessions on Thursday nights.
That's right.
And so if you enjoy figure drawing as well, come join us. Thursday nights here locally at the studio, 6 to 8 p.m., drop-in drawing. We have models that will come in, clothed model drawing, and it's for 2 hours. It's a phenomenal time. We've got a great group of artists that drop in You can come in whenever you like, whenever you want. Bring your own materials, or we have material kits that you can pick up and purchase. And I think it's one of the best things to learn. Don't you, Chad? It's hard. Don't get me wrong. It's very hard. But I think it's a phenomenal way to grow your skill sets as an artist.
So I always tell people that if you can figure out or master figure drawing, you can draw anything. And I also joke with people because, they're always like, well, I can't even draw a stick figure. And I always tell people, if you can draw a stick figure, you can draw anything. Because when you do figure drawing, it starts with basically a stick figure. You're doing a gesture drawing. And then from that gesture drawing, you're building up forms and shapes. And then from there, you're adding details and tones and shadows. And then the final step is you're filling in your contours and all your minor details to really make the figure come to life. So yeah, and the same skills that you use to draw the human figure, you use for still lifes and landscapes and animals and everything else. So, and the other challenge of figure drawing that I think other things don't present as to be as difficult is we see humans so much that if you don't get it, your eye immediately sees it. Now with landscapes or buildings or even
Animals.
sometimes even animals.
Yeah.
You can get away with kind of stretching the rules a bit. But with a figure drawing, unless you're intentionally trying to be abstract, your eye will immediately pick out if something's out of proportion or just a little bit off. It's like I say when you draw portraits, sometimes it's the tiniest change that will all of a sudden make a portrait up, make it look exactly like the person that you're drawing. And it can be something so minuscule. It's like the difference between, if you look at two twins, if they're identical twins, you can tell them apart because there's something a little bit different between the two. Maybe one has a bigger left eye, or the nose is a little bit longer, or something like that. Something so small will make one of the twins stand out just a little bit. And it's the same with drawing. If you're drawing a portrait and the nose is slightly too wide, or the lips are down too far, like you can see it. The challenge is getting your eye to do what getting your hand to do what your eye can see, and changing that so it looks exactly what the person looks like. So I think figure drawing is the most versatile skill to learn and apply to something else that you try.
I would definitely agree. That's why, and we've said this before on this live stream, that's why I think drawing portraits of people you know and people you care about tends to be harder, because you know all those little nuances, right? You're aware of all those little bitty nuances, and if you don't feel like you captured them, then you feel like the painting's not good, right? Or the drawing or the painting, the artwork, I should say. You feel like the artwork's not good, and you know it, and you know the difference between that smirk or that little curl of the lip, like Chad's saying. And I think that's what makes it so daggone challenging. That's honestly what makes this portrait so challenging about my daughter, is I know her so well that it's like that slight little here or there, that little difference here or there. It makes it different. It makes it pop or stand out. And you can tell the difference of whether it's accurate or not accurate, And so I'm hoping I can work through this mistake that I made down here on the bottom. The funny part is, Chad, is, since we're in here so often teaching classes, and this is here in the studio, I'm going to see this for the next week, and I'm going to do nothing but stare at that spot. I'm going to do nothing but stare at that spot and just be like, gosh, dang it, I can't believe I messed that up. We'll keep moving it. We'll keep growing. Keep working through it. Let us know you're here, guys. Again, we're excited to take any questions you guys might have, techniques, questions about any kind of mediums or paintings or anything like that. We love it when you guys ask questions. It gives us a chance to talk to you, and hopefully you're drawing and painting with us, getting excited about doing some artwork. It's amazing. We've gotten quite a bit of feedback from people saying, hey, we saw this, we saw that, or letting us know that they're from different parts of the world or from different areas of the United States or even other areas of North America. It's been phenomenal. And so we're so grateful that all of you guys join us and jump in, and it's just a lot of fun. It's a great way for the Visual Arts Academy and Studio to connect with all of you guys, even if you're not here locally in the Louisville market. So thank you guys for jumping in and joining us. It's an absolute blast. We love it. We are getting some good work done. Now, Chad, you teach a class that is drawing from reference casts. And
Yes.
you and I were discussing, guys, if you're listening and watching, Chad has a piece that he's been working on as an instructional tool for the class, and it's phenomenal. It's absolutely amazing. Maybe, Chad, if you get a chance, maybe you can show it to us. And it's really, really strong. But you and I were discussing the other day, and you were like, I feel like I should keep pushing it. I should keep pushing it here or there. And I kind of encouraged Chad. I said, guys, I mean, maybe you guys can see it. If he'll show it to us,
I'll get it.
Tell us what you think. But it's one of those ones where I go, yeah, you could probably work it and keep working it and keep working it and keep working it. But it is absolutely gorgeous. I think you should just wrap it up, finish it up, and keep moving forward, right? Because knowing you, Chad, you could probably keep working on that thing for years. You know what I mean? But I think you should go, this is phenomenal. This is great. Let's keep moving on. Yeah, take a look at this, guys.
Let's see. I'm trying to here. Let me move the camera. So
Wow, look at that. Come on, if that doesn't get some of you guys talking, I don't know what will. This is amazing. Look at this piece. That's truly sculptural. I mean, that is really drawing in the form of sculpture. You know what I mean? And I think that's absolutely fantastic. But Chad, what were you getting hung up on? I know you want to add some more of that black negative space. Can you talk a little bit about that? What are you going to do there? What tools are you going to try? How's that going to work?
yeah. So let me grab I like to have a little pointer pencil here. Here we go. I'm trying to see. There's a bit of that shine. This is what I'm talking about with graphite. I've mentioned this before. When you use the kind of layer and layer and layer upon graphite, you get a bit of a shine, and you can see it in here. So if I bend it a certain way, it'll catch the light, and it's like you can't even, like right there, you start to lose some of that shadow. Here you can really see it, but I have to put it at an angle for you to see it. So that's the downside of graphite, especially when you're using B pencils. They're very soft lead, so you get a lot of residual on the paper, and like I said, it gives that little shine to it. But either way, beyond that, yeah, obviously I was gonna add some more of the black around just to really highlight the what I want to say, the shadows and the tones there. And this is how, when we draw a cast reference, we put the cast in a dark box surrounded, and I have a cardboard box that I put a black sheet in. That just eliminates a lot of the reflective light. And so you get kind of more pure tones or shadows and those kind of things. So yeah, so I wanted to add that. But the thing that I was getting hung up on, and it's gotten a bit better, is with paper, depending on the tooth of the paper, it will shine or show through in a drawing, and it'll come up with, like, you have to almost look at it like, I don't want to say microscopically, but you have to really be looking for it. And you've got to look up close to it, and you'll see like little bits and pieces of the paper will come through in little specks. I mean, it's kind of like when you talk with your underpainting, the raw sienna or the burnt umber or whatever coming through the drawing or through the painting. In the same way, the paper will come through the drawing just a little bit. And so the way you get through that is by using a pencil, like you see here, with a very extended sharp lead. And what that does is it gets in the little crevices of the grain of paper. Now, the average person just looking at this is not going to care about that. But
Right.
I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So when I look at it, I'm like, okay, I don't mind the softness, but at the same time, I want the blending to be so smooth, you don't even see graphite. You don't see it as a drawing anymore. But that's just me personally. But to your point, we talked about this a little bit the other day, the question is, do you spend all your time in one drawing and making that like exceptional, or do you do a drawing that is at a level that you're happy with and that you're really good at, and make a lot more drawings? And I think there's something to be said about making a lot more drawings rather than just really diving into a drawing and potentially overworking it. That's
Right.
the other danger of just really, putting too much lead down. So for me, one of the ways I try to get rid of some of that showing through is I use a 4H pencil, which is a very hard lead and doesn't leave a lot of lead on the paper. So you really got to work it. So it's literally, you're just going back and forth over the same area, over different areas, and it's filling in those little tiny gaps that you wouldn't notice unless I was pointing it out to you. It's kind of like if you renovate something in your house and you're putting it all together and it looks great, but where all the little, nail marks are and little divots and all that kind of stuff that no one else would see. That's kind of how it is with me when I look at these. I see all the little imperfections, little things that I want to work on and get better at. And the other thing too is, comparison is probably the worst thing for an artist. And so I'll look online and I'll see artists that are drawing from reference, and they'll do these incredible drawings that look three-dimensional. It looks like the actual object itself. And I look at this, I think, I could get there. I could do it just a little bit more. But the danger is, of course, overworking it, and then you lose what you have. So I text Seth last night and I told him, I was like, you know what, you're right. I'm gonna fill in some more black around here. I'm gonna make one or two more little touches, but beyond that, I think we need to call it a night on this one and then work on another cast drawing for class. So,
And if people are wondering out there, yes, I did screenshot that message, and I will show that to him for many, many years to come when he said that, yes, Seth, you are right. So don't be afraid. I have it screenshot. I have it saved, and I will pull that card out many, many times whenever he tells me I'm not right about something. Don't worry, folks. But
very funny.
I do want to give a quick shout out to Patsy. Patsy, thank you so much for the comments. Thank you so much for the kind support, the words, everything. We're so appreciative of your support and your enthusiasm for what we're doing here at the Visual Arts Academy and Studio. Thank you so very much, Patsy. And yes, please come by and check out the artworks once we get them done. We'd be honored for you to come by and swing by and see us. Thank you so much, Patsy, for all the comments and support and everything else. Guys, we hope you're having a blast. We are cruising along here. I'm starting to actually sculpt out a little bit of this sweater here, and I think it's starting to kind of come to life a little bit. It's getting some full dimensionality. Starting to really kind of like it, which is good because I'm going to be kicking myself over this floor for quite some time. But I know what I need to do now. I need to give a break from the sweater even, and I need to move on to a different section and start working some other sections. Because the other thing is we talk a lot, Chad, about color relevancy, right? We need to work on other areas so that I can see how are these colors going to affect my other areas, right? Because we know that these colors will affect the wall. They're going to affect the skin tone, that's going to affect the couch and things of that nature. So I need to kind of work holistically all around and make sure that I don't just focus on one area. But this is a great question here, Chad. Listen to this one, brother. I got it up on the screen if you want to read it. From David, we've got, Mr. Ashcraft, great to see you, sir. Thanks for joining us. What an honor. How much of your individual technique is learned versus, just if I may be so bold as to ask, God-given talent? I mean, one could take years of art instructions and still not have the ability to pull off these kind of works. Man, David, you are hitting the nail on the head about a lot of different things, but Chad and I have some unique points on that. And I think that, Chad, we should both take this one, if that's all right with you. And
yeah,
I'll
definitely.
Off. David, I think that you have a point. There is such a thing as God-given talent. For instance, I could practice singing. I would love to sing. I would give up all my drawing ability if I could just sing. Now, I'm never going to be able to sing like Celine Dion or, any of these people that can just belt it out, right? Whitney Houston or anything like that. But I do believe that if I took voice lessons, if I trained a lot, if I've spent a lot of time, I could probably somewhat learn to sing, but I'm never going to be able to sing just naturally, gifted like they are, if that makes sense. Chad talks about his wife all the time. Chad, you can throw her in there as an example all the time. She's a beautiful, natural, gifted singer, right? But to your point, David, it is practice. It is technique. It is building. It is growing. It is learning. It is training. It's all of those things combined that I think allow people to do certain works. But I've seen some people who didn't have a whole lot of talent that worked their butts off And boy, their technique and their skill became so good that they did beautiful works of art. And they put the time and they put the practice. And I've seen other individuals who are just naturally gifted with the ability to throw it out there. You know what I mean? So I think it's a combination of both. But I will take personally skill and hard work and practice over that talent any day, because I think that the hard work and everything else pays off. Some people think it's just easy, but Chad and I will both sit here and tell you we've both spent an enormous amount of our lives perfecting these skills that, yes, maybe we have a talent given by God or however you want to view that. But I think it's the practice and the effort that makes up for most of it. At least that's my take, David. What a phenomenal question. I'll flip it over to Chad.
Yeah, there is a lot to that question, and I have a few different takes on it. I think the first thing I think is if you've ever seen Ratatouille, there's a character in Ratatouille, the main chef, that his byline is "and can cook," and there's a critic that comes in and says, I disagree with that. Not everyone can cook. There's only certain people that can become a chef. And I think there is some truth to that, just like what Seth was saying. And I would agree. My wife is an amazing singer, but I could never do what she does. No matter how much I practice, no matter how many hours of instruction I would receive, I would never get to her level. It's the same in sports. I look at certain people that can do things that I will never be able to do. I could practice from now until I die, and I'll never be able to dunk a basketball on a 10-foot goal. It's just not going to happen. And there are people that can do that just naturally. I remember in high school, there was someone that could dunk from the free throw line. I can't even touch the rim underneath it, let alone jump from the free throw line and dunk. And they're just physically more capable than I am of doing that. However, on the other hand, it really gets to what do you mean by being good? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well,
so like in art, there is a sense of subjectivity. There is a sense in which I'll look at some art and I'll be like, that is the worst thing I've ever seen, and people will rave about it. I mean, I've seen that all the time online, where you see some of the dumbest things I've ever seen in my life.
A lot of really bad
to use the cleanest language possible, and people will just like rave over it. I'm just like, what do you see in? But everyone has different tastes, right? So for example, if we're talking about hyperrealism, where someone is going to draw or paint something so it looks like a photograph. There are some people who will practice that their whole life and never be able to do it. And other people that just have a natural eye to be able to do that. And now, if all art is supposed to be hyper realistic, then that means no one can be an artist. But all art doesn't have to be hyper realistic. It can be abstract. It can be expressive, impressionistic. It can be whatever. So it really just comes down to like, what are you trying to do with your art? Now, I will say, if you're going to be an abstract artist or an impressionist or a pop artist, whatever kind of movement you want to join, there is something to knowing how to draw, knowing composition, knowing all the fundamentals. And those are things that you can learn. Those are skills that you can practice and become better at. So I think it's kind of both. It's like there are some people that, there are people I'm better at drawing than, and there are other people that are better than me at drawing. And we both have worked probably just as hard. And to Seth's point, there are years and years and hours and hours and hours that you practice something. Even if you're given a talent by God to do it, you still have to put in the work to get to where you need to be. Like, you're not going to, depending on what you believe or whatever, if God just gives you a gift to do something, you're not just going to be born with a gift and just automatically, it takes years. Even child prodigies at math or music or chess or whatever, yes, they beat 99% of people, but they still have to put in hours and hours and hours upon hours of study. The immediate example I think of is, I'm kind of a fan of chess. I'm not great at it, but I like playing it. And Magnus Carlsen is one of the best chess players that's ever lived. He's alive right now, and he's a young guy. I think he's in his 30s right now or something. But he was able to beat, he tied Harry Kasparov, who was at the time the world champion, when he was like 12 years old, because he was so good. He was a child prodigy, and he has a mind no one else has. Like, he literally has 10,000 over. I don't know what the official number is, but I've heard over 10,000 games photographically memorized in his mind, the entire game. Now, I could study chess from now and for 50 years and never get to that point, and I would never be able to beat him. But at the same time, I enjoy playing chess, even though I'm not that great at it, and I love the mental exercising. So it's the same with art. You might not be able to draw like as good as someone else or paint as good as someone else. There's a freedom in art to say, who cares? I love to paint. It may not look like yours, but that's fine. It may not be as technically accurate as yours, but that's fine. I still work at it and still work hard at it. So the one last thing I would also say, when I used to draw like very realistic, I still do, but I used to judge all art by how realistic is it, how accurate is it. And as I grew over time, I discovered abstract art and conceptual art. My palette of art really changed and grew. So at the time, I did not really like Van Gogh's work because it was very loose. Some of the perspective was off. It just looked a little wonky to me, I guess is the way you could say it. But now Van Gogh's work is some of my favorite work of all time. I love looking at his drawings. Some of his drawings, be honest with you, figuratively, are not that great. But his way of using color, his texture, his brushwork is just phenomenal. And it kind of overshadows some of the technicalities that I think he could improve.
Yep.
And, it makes you almost arrogant to even say something like that, because you realize, like, we're all in process. We're all in things. So anyways, a long answer to your question, just to say that it is both. Yes, you're given a God-given talent, but at the same time, like, you have to steward that talent. That's the way I always say it, that I do believe in God. And so I do believe God has given me a gift, but I have to steward that gift. I don't waste it. And the way I steward it is by working really hard and practicing many hours to get to where I am. It's like what Patty said. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Patsy, I called you Patty. Patsy just put a comment about this old saying, practice makes perfect. There's a sense in which that's true. You're given a gift. Just because you're given a gift, you don't have to work hard to perfect it and to work at it and to get better at it. So, yeah, I would say it's both. So.
Well, and so I'm going to chime in on this a little bit, because I was never I'm not a basketball guy because I'm not good at basketball, but I always appreciated the basketball in the 90s because, I was part of that whole Jordan era, right? Like I got that whole Jordan experience, and it was, everybody wanted to be like Mike and all this stuff. And then Kobe Bryant came out, and I was not a big fan of Kobe Bryant simply because, it was Jordan, right? It was Michael Jordan was the greatest basketball player of all time. I still think he is. That's a debate for another time. But there was something that was said about Kobe Bryant when he said, where does your confidence come from? They asked him, where does your confidence come from? And Patsy and David, people believe that Kobe Bryant is a unique basketball player, right? You're talking about like a prodigy in basketball, right? He's one of the top 5, one of the top 10, whatever you want to say. But this saying is what really stuck with me. And his response was, I have that calmness and that confidence because I know that I've done everything I possibly can to prepare. He's put in the practice. He's put in the work. And I think that, as an artist, it's not quite the same thing, right? Because you're not training your body. You're not meant, but you're training your skill. You're putting in the work. You're putting that effort. And there is a confidence that is shown through your work because of that time that you've put in, because of that effort that you've given, because the practice that you've done. And so, yes, there is, to kind of cap this off so we can move on to another topic, or maybe we don't, maybe we stay on this one. I think there is some talent that is given, absolutely. But to be a good steward, like Chad says, I think that's ultimately what you end up seeing in the work. You see the stewardship of the talent or the skill whether given or practiced, you see that come to fruition in the artwork. And I think that's the beauty of the visual arts, is that you have a physical result of all of that effort and all of that energy and all of that time and passion. You get to see it physically culminate in something. And I think that's really powerful and really cool.
Oh, I have a follow-up question that is perfect for you.
Yes.
That has to deal with this. Okay, so you're talking about Kobe Bryant and that quote that you just shared, and I think that is totally applicable to those who struggle with imposter syndrome, because if you apply to imposter syndrome, you sit there and think, how does someone like Kobe? Now, granted, Kobe is one of the greatest players ever. I agree with you. Jordan is the GOAT of all time. Right. But either way, the confidence that he had as a basketball player, I think, is the same confidence you can have as an artist. And I think it's, to his point, you practice so much that, when it comes down to creating something, like, you have the confidence to do it because you've practiced it over and over and over and over again. And I know, you sit here and think, even us doing this live stream, like, at first you kind of get nervous about it because you're drawing in front of other people, and I don't see who sees this. So I don't know. Like, I see in the corner, so many eyeballs, and I don't even see all the socials. So I don't know who's watching us. But you get to a point where you get to a point where you're like, you know what? I've practiced, and you have to get to a point of acceptance where even what I'm doing right now is not the best I can do, because I'm simply just practicing. In 5 years, I'll be better. So anyways, I want to turn it over to you, because I know we've talked about this, and I've talked to other friends about the struggle with imposter syndrome. How do you think applying something like that can help with imposter syndrome? And, maybe speak to some people that struggle with that.
Well, I personally struggle with that, so we'll address that. But, I want to give something that Patsy says here. I put it on the screen as well for you guys to see. It's, she goes, one thing for sure is with a painter or a drawer, you can always erase your mistakes as you go along. Yeah. And I agree with that, right? I mean, that is the beauty of it, or like Patsy, you could even go one step further. A singer can always sing another song, right? A musician can always play another song. There is never that ultimate sense of failure, right? And I think that's the beauty in creation, is there is no ultimate failure, if you will. You can always rework, you can always move along, which is something that I need to do on this floor from earlier this evening. So I will be doing that. But we're talking about imposter syndrome, and this is something that Chad knows that I've struggled with, a lot, a great deal. And I think there's a balance here. So I'm actually, and I'm really proud of myself in this moment, because I made a big mistake, which oh my gosh, I just got a funny text, and I'm gonna say it live. My wife just texted me and said, so anyway, the longer answer to your question is, she said, should be the live stream slogan, because the two of you always say that.
That's awesome.
So she just texted me privately, guys, to let me know that Chad and always go, well, that's the long answer to answer your question, which I guess we do. Maybe that should be the slogan. The long answer is, right?
You know what? I don't care. How about that?
That's so awesome. Well, thank you for that private comment, Caitlin. We appreciate you. You could have said that live on here, but that's okay. I get it. You didn't want to be called out for it. Well, too bad you did anyway. No, but this is a perfect example. So in the past, I would have let my mistake on the floor down here with my oil painting give me a sense of anxiety, because I would have felt like, oh man, I'm not a master enough to be able to teach this technique or this medium. And that's just not true. I know that that's not true, right? Mistakes happen. Even great masters make mistakes. Even the masters made mistakes, right? Chad, you've seen some of the drawings of Da Vinci. You see some of the drawings of, like you were talking about, some of the other artists and things. And so I have to remind myself, that is not me not knowing my craft or not being skilled enough to teach or to be considered exceptional. It's just a mistake. And I think a lot of times when we make mistakes, we self-loathe, or we convince ourselves that mistake is somehow validating that we're an imposter in that scenario. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so, instead of just seeing it for what it is, it's an error, and errors happen. Musicians hit wrong notes. Singers sing wrong notes, right? I mean, there's a great story that I think is brilliant, and it's not the same, but it's a beautiful thing of it's a story. And gosh, I think it was Sinatra. When he was later on in his years, and it was one of his last shows, Chad, and he's singing in front of a crowd, and he's singing some of his classics, and he could visibly not remember the lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
And he froze up on stage in the middle of one of the songs that he sung thousands of times. And he froze, and he couldn't remember the lyrics. And apparently it went on for a very uncomfortably long time. And somebody in the audience finally said, "It's okay, Frankie, we love you." Right? And then all of a sudden, the lyrics came back to him, and he kept going. Now, I know that's not exactly like relatable to imposter syndrome, but I think it's a beautiful message in the sense of even the greatest of the greats doing something 1,000 times over sometimes make mistakes and get lost. That doesn't mean they're still not one of the greats. That still doesn't mean that they're not exceptional. That doesn't mean that they're not one of the best to ever do what they did or to be capable of maintaining the level of acumen that they have, right? And so for me, something that's helped me with imposter syndrome is the sense that I don't have to validate myself or I don't have to beat myself up. I just have to appreciate the talents and the skills that I do have and pass those along to all of our students. And I know I do that very well. And so I think the more that you self-talk positively, the more that you really, truly, and I mean this, truly evaluate yourself. Don't blow smoke. Don't create negativity that's there. Don't create positivity that shouldn't be there either. But truly be assessed. And then if you go, I need to put more work in. I need to go bigger. I need to do this, or I should practice that. Then practice it. Then do the work. Then get better. And when you do that, you'll feel like Kobe Bryant. You'll go, I have practiced enough. No one can call me an imposter because I know what I've put in. I know the effort, the energy, the passion that I've done, and my results show that. And that's what I think has helped me tremendously.
I love that.
Maybe a little too carried away. Sorry. I've done that a lot today, actually, Chad.
That's great. That was the long answer to the question.
I guess. A new slogan for the VAAS live sessions. The long answer to the question. That's actually pretty good. I mean, really.
I mean, why not? I mean, who doesn't like a long answer to a question?
Well, that's why we go for 2 hours, right? We've got a lot to talk about. But I think the other thing is this. I think you've talked about this, and you've talked about this being one of your struggles, which is the influences of others, right? When you look at others' work, that makes you feel not validated, right? It's, it takes your validation away, and you go, comparison is what you said. I apologize, Chad. Comparison is what you said. Comparison can do that, and it can hurt you tremendously because, just because you see somebody on there that's doing this or that shouldn't discredit you. Especially if your work is of high quality, right? You know what I mean? Like if your work is at a different level, then you're just at a different level, and that's okay. Yeah. But you're not at the elite level, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But I think that a lot of times when you are at an elite level and you go and look at other people that are also at an elite level, but theirs seems better than yours or seems different than yours, you discredit yourself and you knock yourself backwards. I mean, that's something that, correct me if I'm wrong, Chad, that's something that you've struggled with, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So how do you overcome that? What have you done to work on, because I think it's healthy to see other artists. I think it's beautiful. I love that we are a worldwide, a global community of artists via social media, right? I think it's great. I think it's absolutely, I wish we could have had this 20, 30 years ago, right? To be able to see artists creating all over the world. But it can also be detrimental. So what have you done to kind of work on your assessment of yourself compared to these other artists that you get to see?
Yeah, so I think, a couple things. I remember the big picture of things. So this actually just happened today. I was flipping through social media, I had a few minutes, whatever, and I saw a video of Phil Collins giving his farewell on his last stage performance. And when I saw the video, I didn't know it was Phil Collins at first because it was this old man coming up on stage in a cane, and it was a close up of him, and I was like, who what? And then it said, Phil Collins giving his final address. And I was like, that does not look like Phil Collins. Like, I'm not a huge fan of Phil Collins. It's not like, I followed him my whole life, but I know who Phil Collins is. I know what his music is.
Yeah.
And I saw him and I'm like, that's a frail old man. And, you sit there and you think it wasn't, but, 10, 15, 20 years ago, he looked young and active and creating music. And you think how fast time goes by. And I often think about that and think about, in the grand scheme of things, my life is both significant and insignificant at the same time. Like I have inherent worth as a person. I've, been created by God. I have things to do and that kind of thing. But at the same time, in the grand scheme of things, I'll be forgotten at some point by people I know or generations that come after me. So that helps me keep things in the right perspective, I think. So on one side, I sit there and I think, other people, I'll see other people's work and I think, man, I can work harder, I could get better, or, you feel that tinge of maybe a bit of jealousy that they're more successful than you or whatever it is. But then I just remember at the end of the day, we're both going to die. I know that sounds morbid, but the reality is like, I'm called to do what I'm called to do. I'm not called to do what someone else is called to do. I've been gifted the way I've been gifted. I've not been gifted the way someone else has been gifted. So I need to embrace that in my life. And so I'm not perfect at that. So like, for example, as we've talked about, I've, struggled with that from time to time, see someone else's work or someone else's success and think, man, did I waste my life? Well, why am I not at that level or whatever? But I sit back and I remember, no, I've gone through the things that I've gone through because that shapes who I am as a person. And those other people are going through what they're going through because it's shaping them as people, And and as well, my faith helps me in that too, to remind me like I'm ultimately accountable to God. I've been gifted by God. It's not something that I'm doing. Even though I work very hard at this, he's the one that opens and closes doors. So I have to have a humility about life and that he's placed me at this specific time, this specific place for a reason. And so I need to embrace that. I didn't do that all my life. And so the times that I didn't do that, I would get very satisfied with life. I'd be a very unhappy person. A bit, you go through spells of depression or regret.
Yep.
But the more you realize your place in the bigger picture of things, it takes away a lot of that and gives you just a sense of calmness. And so for me personally, and I've said this before, to different people off camera or whatever, that this for me is the most content season of life I've ever experienced my whole life. And it's been on the tail end of what I would consider, as someone would maybe say, are failures or closed doors. They were very difficult to get through, but then on the other end of them, you sit back and see failure or not being as successful as someone else, even though it's painful at the time. In the big grand scheme of things, it does not hold the weight that you think it does at the time. And it's okay to fail. It's okay to not be as good as someone else. Because you're not those people. You're you, and you have your responsibility. You're accountable for your life, not someone else's. So that's the long answer to the question. I'm sorry, I had to say it. But
we find our way back to that again, my friend.
Yeah. So I literally have to do that. Otherwise, I will go down this spiral of regret and frustration and second guessing myself. But the minute I don't do that and I just remember, I'm been placed here at this time, at this place with a gift and a specific thing to do, then it erases the imposter guilt or the imposter syndrome. It erases the sense of competitiveness, the feelings of failure or regret. It takes care of all of that.
Absolutely.
So that's what I have to do. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and I think the other thing is that I think oftentimes other people would never see you as an imposter, right? I don't mean you specifically, I mean others. They don't view it the way that you do. Exactly. You're putting that on yourself. Others are not putting you on that on you. And I think you have to remember that,
Yeah.
That's
exactly
we look at that.
right.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that's exactly right. It's just like, as we talked before, you could look at a drawing that you're working on and think you messed it up, kind of like what you're talking about. But someone else looking at it that doesn't understand or doesn't know what you've put into it, doesn't know your skill level, or doesn't know what's that all they see is a picture, they'll look at that and be like, what are you talking about? I don't see anything wrong with that. It's like we talked about before. You're renovating, you see all the dings and all the little things that other people aren't going to see. So, yeah, I'll be honest with you, I lost my point. But
sometimes when you take the long way around, you don't make it around.
You don't get back around. That's right.
That's right. But no, I mean, it is challenging though, guys. It is, especially in a world of where we get to see everybody's everything. You know what I mean? Like you get to see everybody's work, you get to see everybody's stuff, and sometimes that's great, but it also can be challenging because you're exposed to so much. You think, well, maybe I am an imposter because look at this, look at what everybody else is doing. What makes me unique? And I think Chad hit the nail on the head there. And I'm going to kind of reiterate that where he said, you're not competing with others, you're competing with yourself. And I think Patsy even mentioned, it's not a competition, even though a lot of times we think it is. It's not necessarily a competition, right? It's just what it is, and we make it that. We make it something that it doesn't need to be. And I think as artists, we do that a lot because not always, but typically, I think a lot of artists, Chad, feel things, right? And they're called to create because they do feel things, and then they want to articulate that in some manner, whether that's for themselves or whether that's to have other people understand, right, their emotion or their situation or whatever it is. And so I think that becomes something that is tough because they feel so deeply. So then they feel consumed by that other sense of self-doubt or whatever it is also. And that's obviously not everyone. I'm not speaking in generalization, but I'm saying I think, a lot of artists do feel deeply and they want to express it in some form, whether it's musically, acting, or something, or visually, if you're a visual artist. And I think sometimes putting yourself out there opens yourself up for that self-doubt.
Yeah.
Not putting yourself out there doesn't do that. And so I think a lot of people choose to not do that. They just continue to be consumers, and they don't put themselves out there, and they just consume because consuming's safer.
Yeah.
And I have a saying, which is it's okay to consume. It's okay to watch movies and read books, in my opinion. It's okay to do all that, but don't just consume. Create as well. If my nieces and nephews up in Michigan, they've heard this for so many years. One of my nieces, she's it's funny, she says it to me all the time. Don't just be a consumer, create. Don't be a consumer, just create. Because if you're just consuming, you're not regurgitating anything you've learned. You're not putting anything out there. You're just constantly consuming. Don't get me wrong. It's great to consume, but don't just consume. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I believe we're all called to create in some form or fashion. That could be creating parties or events or clothes or something, children, a home. But we're called to create in some fashion. And a lot of people don't want to put themselves out there because it's easier. It's scary to put yourself out there. It's scary to be on a live stream, guys and gals, and make a mistake when you're the lead instructor of your own art academy. It's terrifying. But that mistake doesn't define me. And it doesn't define me as an instructor. And it doesn't define me as an artist. And I know that I give a lot of wonderful instruction to my students. But I could very easily sit here and beat myself up and create myself in an imposter situation, if that makes sense. Does that make sense, guys? Chad, am I talking in circles, or does that make sense?
Yeah, you typically talk in circles. I have no
I
idea
do.
what you're talking
I know it. I know.
No.
Get out of the circle.
I think you're exactly right. And it only becomes an identity if you make it that identity. In other words, if even after you complete this painting, let's say when you fix that spot and you complete the painting, if every time someone looks at it and you point out, oh yeah, I met this spot right here, but I was able to fix it. Now all of a sudden the identity of that painting is all your mistakes, not the finished product. So it really is up to you whether you're going to focus on all the mistakes or whether you're going to focus on the process that got you to the end goal. And I think all of us artists need to be reminded constantly that we're all in process. The most amazing picture, painting, drawing, or whatever you're doing right now, It's not going to be the most amazing thing that you've ever done in 10 years. So like, just remember, you're constantly improving and moving and growing. So don't ever feel hindered by the things that you're working on right now, for sure.
I think it's a brilliant point. Want to give a shout
I try to
out
make brilliant.
Sorry, go ahead.
I try to make brilliant points.
And you do them beautifully and often, and we're so grateful that you get to experience them. So thank you, good sir. I want to give a couple shout outs. We've got Sloan that had jumped on. Sloan, I don't know if you're still joining us, but thank you so much for jumping in. DZ Zinda, oh, that's my girl. Thanks for jumping in. So happy to see you. Tom Tupp, grateful that you're here. Patsy, David, all of these individuals. Caitlin, thank you guys so much for jumping in. It's so amazing to see you guys joining us. We hope you enjoy watching us create. It's a lot of fun for us to create with you guys. Again, the hope is that you've got a sketchbook, or you've got a painting, or you've got a drawing or a pastel or something that you're working on, and you're creating with us, because boy, we want you to be creative. We just talked about how we want you guys to be creators and not just consumers. And that includes even this live stream. So don't just be a consumer of this live stream. Get your sketchbook out, get something out there, or stitching or sewing or something. We've had a couple of people that have been beautiful craftsmen of I don't know, needlework. I apologize, I'm not incredibly well versed in that. I'll have to ask one of our students from Pin Cut and Sew, and she'll verse me on how to appropriately say that. I should have asked probably in the past. I will in the future. But guys, get out there and create, and come create with us here at the Visual Arts Academy and Studio. Whether you come in and visit the studio, come in and take a class or a session, or if you're only joining us live, we love it. We love that you participate with us. The goal is to get everybody creating well and just having fun and expressing themselves. And it's just a phenomenal community, Chad, that's continued to grow. And we're so grateful that it does continue to grow. Some of these glazes are absolutely kicking my butt. I'm working through it. Cross stitch. Ah, Patsy got me. Cross stitch. Thank you so much.
And needlepoint.
Yep, she got it. Yeah, needlepoint and cross stitch. Thank you, Patsy. Not my area of expertise for sure.
My mother-in-law also hooks rugs, so they're hooking as well.
That's yeah, man. I'm excited. We are going to continue to get different artists from different skills. We brought in Mitchell Kaufman and Charles Pate Jr., award-winning painters and sculptors. And guys, we're going to continue to bring in other artists and other guests. We're excited to get those individuals. If you have any recommendations, we're all for it. We love to get people in that can express and talk about their craft and their skill and their passion for the arts. We're all about it. So if you have anybody you want to recommend, send us a message. Say, hey, you should bring in Josie. You should bring in Steve. You should bring in Bobby. We would love to talk to these individuals, get them on here creating with us. The goal is to have them create live and talk about their passion, their skills, and their knowledge. And boy, it's just so much fun, Chad. It's great. I love doing this with you. But, buddy, I'm not going to lie. It's really cool when we get some guests on here.
I agree.
I concur. You remember when that was such, I don't remember what movie that was from, but boy, that was such a big thing.
Oh, yeah.
Do you concur? I concur.
That was one of those moments where I was trying to think of something like halfway profound and encouraging to say, line my blank. So like, yeah, I agree.
That's right. Sometimes I get to say the profound things and you can only go along with it.
There you go. I'll take it. You're definitely, I know it probably doesn't seem this way, but you're definitely more of a talker in real life than I am. I really try to be intentional and use a lot of words when we do these live streams. But so this is like word overload for me in general. So whenever you take over and talk, it's nice. I love it. It gives me a little verbal break, so I'm all for it.
A little bit of breathing time, right?
Yep.
Well, that was what was so awesome about having Charles and Mitch was, I mean, just not only the different perspectives, but the way that they talk about it, the way that they go about it. And that's what I'm excited for with some other artists. And even, to get Thomas in here. which we've been working on that schedule as well for a while. We're going to get him in here soon, guys. But the goal is to just how they talk about it, how they articulate it. Sometimes they're saying similar things to you and I, and then sometimes they're saying stuff that's completely different. And I love that, right? Not only the different perspectives, but just the verbiage that they use, the language that they use. It's so nice to see how different artists take different approaches to this stuff. And I think it's great. I think it's absolutely phenomenal. And I use that word loosely, but I mean it. I mean, it really is amazing to see, the different perspective of all these different artists from different backgrounds and different skills. And I thoroughly enjoy it. And I know that most of you do too. And we're grateful that you guys join us. I have gotten quite a bit of work done. I've started my first glazes on the background here, on some of these background components. So I've started putting in some of these glazes on the shelving unit back here on the shelves, the built-ins, and I've put in some of these first glazes even on the couch to push the values of this couch to really kind of push it into those elements. Now, again, I'm going to have to continue to work this. This is something that's going to continue to get worked and built. But and again, I won't make this mistake twice. I need to be patient and let these layers dry fully so that I can come back in with my next glazes. So what I'm probably going to do next week is I'm probably going to start on my other painting, which I'll put up here in just a second and walk you guys through it. I'm going to probably start on that next painting, so that way I don't rush this. Now, a week should go by, and that should be plenty of time. I think it should be dry by that time. But I still think I want to make sure that I don't make the same mistake I recently just made today. And so learn from those mistakes. Ancora imparo, right? Still, I'm learning. I'm always going to be learning. I'm always going to be pushing myself to know more. And I think this is a great example for me to be able to do that. And I need to remind myself, okay, you want to trust this process. I said it to a student today, and she goes, I'm trusting you. And I said, no, you got to trust the process. Don't trust me. Trust the process. And she just looked at me and smiled. And I said, yep, she's got it, right? But that's what I've got to do. I've got to take my own advice here. I've got to take my own wisdom, and I need to trust the process. And I'm going to trust this process. I believe I'm going to. I'm going to fix that mistake. I'm not going to let it define me. I'm not going to talk about it with, everybody that walks by, unless you guys come in and go, hey, Seth, where's that spot you messed up? And I'll be, oh, it's right there. See it? And that's okay too. I'm happy to show you guys because I know it's hard to see on camera, but I'm going to take Chad's advice and wisdom and not let it dictate me and have control over me moving forward, because I don't like convincing myself I'm an imposter. I don't like having that element of it to my life. So I have to actively make an effort, right, Chad? I have to make an effort to not let that be part of me as an artist. And I think a lot of artists do struggle with that. I think that is something that they do struggle with over time. And so, I think it's healthy to work on that. But man, that floor looks better with a red tint to it. I am going to like it once it's dry and once it's set. And I'm going to like it when that red tint gets on there, and I'm going to love it.
I was thinking of, I just thought of kind of an illustration to go with this. Like, both you and I are married and love our wives, and we have amazing marriages, and we find joy in our wives. We love our wives. We love spending time with them, out with them, talking with them. But, if we were hanging out together and all I mentioned to you was all the things that annoyed me about my wife, or you did the same, or you felt the way that they felt short, or you fell short as a husband, or whatever it is, if that's all you focused on, then that would seem like a very unhealthy marriage. And I think there's a similar aspect of, as an artist, if all you're focusing on is all the ways that you fell short, you made a mistake here, this wasn't good, that didn't work out, and you forgot the joy that you have in simply creating, I think that's a pretty good indication that you have an unhealthy mindset when it comes to being an artist. You can fall way over on the other side where you just think you're the greatest thing that ever walked the earth and just like, oh, I never make a mistake. I think that's bad. Just like in a marriage, you can be kind of delusional and think, oh, we never have problems, we never argue. I'm not saying you have to argue every day or anything like that, but the reality is every marriage has its things. You're two people living together and trying to work this thing out. You're different, So you're going to butt heads from time to time. But if all you're focusing on is that, well, then that's going to be unhappy. It's the same thing as an artist. If all you're focused on is what people think, or how you fell short, or how it's not going to work, or how other people are going to view it, then I think you're falling into an unhealthy mindset of what it means to be an artist. And you have to return to the fact that you've been given this gift to steward, and that it's a joy to you. It's a joy to exercise that gift. And I think that balances you out a little bit. So,
well, and I think a lot of times too, you forget why you're doing it in the first place. Are you doing it? Have you always? And that's okay. Look, getting. Oh gosh, I don't think it's a bad thing to want to receive and to receive praise from others, right? I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think it's bad to want people to like or respect your work. But if you forget the purpose of why you're creating in the first place, that can become problematic. When the want and the desire to have people love and praise your work becomes greater than why you're doing it in the first place. Now, some people may say, well, what if that was the whole reason? The whole reason I'm creating is to get that. Well, then you probably aren't going to have an issue. You know what I mean? Like then that's your whole purpose of it. Fine. But I think that, you don't want to get away from what your goal was in the beginning to have, right? Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm articulating that as well as I normally do some other things, but I hope that point is made of it's very easy, I think, to forget why you're doing it and let all those other things take hold. And then that becomes a problem because you're not holding on to the reason why you're doing it in the first place, and you forget it, and that becomes problematic.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I agree with you. I'll be the first person to tell you, I love if someone comes and looks at my artwork and they give me compliments and they tell me it's good. I mean, there's nothing better. I love that. But at the same time, I can't form my identity from that because that can't bear the weight of ultimate meaning and purpose in my life. So, you can't rely on that totally. Those are just extra nice blessings along the way when someone appreciates what you do. And so you have to remember the purpose, like you're saying, the purpose to why you're creating in the first place. Absolutely.
Which I think is a product. Sorry, Chad. I thought you were.
Oh, no. The only thing I was going to add was just to say, like, for me, as I've said before, I always have to remind myself, like, what is my thesis statement? Well, my thesis statement is I create work that inspires or motivates or moves people to contemplate God. So that's that's why I create. For other people, it's different. And so I have to constantly remind myself of that. Otherwise, I will do exactly what you're saying. You fall into the error of wanting approval or wanting success or wanting whatever else, and you forget why you're doing it. So.
Well, I think that's part of the problem with our society today, right? It's like you post, and I fall on this a lot of times with the Academy, which is, hey, we posted this video, we did that. Oh, we got like 3 shares, we got 2 likes, we got 50 likes, we got 100, instead of getting 1,000 or whatever it is, and then I feel defeated because we didn't get that. I'm like, no, wait. That 1 like is all we necessarily need, right? Now, don't get me wrong. This is a business. We need to succeed as a business. But at the same point, it's like we get caught up and they're like, oh, no, I must take that video down, right? No, that's not the validation. The reason we're doing it is because even if we reach 1 artist, even if we reach 1 student, if we can create a positive environment, a positive experience, then this is a success, right? And I think as an artist, this idea of social validity and value is somewhat problematic because it's fleeting. It's a fleeting thing, Chad. Somebody comes and says, hey, Chad, we love your drawing. That's great. That's wonderful, but that's fleeting. And if all you're doing is needing that constantly, well, then you've made an idol out of that fleeting moment, right? You've created something that can never carry, like to your point, it can never carry the weight of itself. And you're always going to be constantly chasing that, always.
That's right.
And I think that's part of what our society has gotten to. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're coming up on just about 10 minutes. I can't believe, Chad, that it's already almost been 2 hours. We're coming up on about 10 minutes. So if you've got a couple questions, now's a good time to ask them. Share it out with us. Let us know you've got that question or two. We'll wrap it up there. We're going to be back next week. Super excited. I might start this next painting, or maybe, depending on how this goes this week, I may come back in and be like, hey guys, I fixed it. Look at that. And then you guys go, wow, we didn't even tell a difference. And then I'm going to go, oh gosh, yeah, Chad was right. But here's the whole point. We're having a blast. We're having a lot of fun. Chad's making fun of me, making me laugh. We appreciate all the comments from everybody that's joined in. We're so grateful for everything you guys do. We hope that you're enjoying creating with us as well. We have our upcoming 8-week session starting March 10th through May 10th. We've got our Thursday night drop-in drawing sessions with clothed figure drawing. We've got our 4-week intro to art sessions popping off. And Chad, we've got some summer camps that we're really excited about in the month of July, which are going to be amazing week-long summer camps for young artists. Guys, be on the lookout for everything that's happening here at the Visual Arts Academy, including our live streams, which hopefully next week we'll have a special guest, or it'll just be Chad and myself again, and we'll have a blast either way. Either way it goes, guys, we're so excited for you to be joining us. We got about 10 minutes left, so ask those last-minute questions. But thank you, guys, for everything you've been doing for these last 2 hours. It's been amazing.
Hey, I'm a special guest. All right.
You are the special guest, my friend. Don't let anybody ever tell you otherwise. I don't care what people say about you. Kidding. I still can't believe my wife texted me that. That's hilarious.
I know. It's great.
That was great. That was awesome. She would be like a good live producer. You know what I mean? Like one of those people that just sits back there and makes fun of you and I during the whole time.
Oh, that's awesome. We should get her on here one time. Just a 3-way conversation. I think would be great. She could give us insights to you as a husband.
We do not need that, guys. We don't need that.
I love that. I'm going to talk to her.
We don't want to have her on here.
I'm going to talk to her about that.
No, I'm kidding.
We're gonna make that happen.
That would be fun, actually. That would be really great. Then we got to see if we get Elizabeth on here. Man, oh, that would be one I'd look forward to. But in all seriousness, actually, I was going to mention this earlier, guys. This is a great example. My wife is very creative. She's very, I would say, kind of artsy, crafty kind of thing. She does beautiful handwritten stuff. She shot photography for a number of years. But she recently came to our clothed figure drawing session, right, Chad? And I was actually here. Chad was here. And she came in and started drawing. And guys, she's, and I'm not picking on her. I'm not saying this negatively. She is not very skilled in drawing. She does not have a lot of skill in drawing. But she came away and she goes, oh my gosh, you know, I love doing this. I think I want to do this more. I want to draw more. And I thought it was amazing, right? The energy that she had, it's something that, you know, we haven't really talked about in the past, but oh my gosh, she was just like, yeah, let's do some more. And I think it's exciting, Chad. And you were blown away too. You even sent me a message like, hey, just so you know, your wife is drawing. And I'm like, yes, this is amazing. But that could be you too, guys. Even if you don't feel like you're skilled in it, you may be blown away. You would come in and have a really great experience, a really good time. And I think my wife was a perfect example of that. I think, Chad, she was actually blown away by the experience. And I know you were here for it, so I think you would agree with me.
Yeah, it was amazing to see. I mean, I love that. I mean, it's like, you know, for someone to try something new, to get outside of their comfort zone, I think it's always amazing. We have a couple of gentlemen that come and they feel like, you know, that figure drawing is intimidating, and especially to do drawing with people there. But they do it. They come back, you know, each week. And it's been awesome to encourage them and see them grow as artists. So don't ever feel like the intimidation that, oh, that's just for like professionals or people that know what they're doing. Like the reason why we do it is because we all need to get better, and we don't know what we're doing. We're all still growing and learning how to do figure drawing. So yeah, we'd love for you no matter what your skill level is.
Now, Chad, I know that you can't see these, but I am in some deep trouble because Caitlin just messaged on Instagram Live and says, let's do it. I'm totally getting a babysitter. Oh, boy, here we go.
I love this. Absolutely.
This is not good, Chad. Let's not get excited about this.
This is amazing. This is amazing. This will be our best guest on the show ever. I cannot wait.
Well, maybe we'll push for this for next week. This might be a good go-around. This is amazing. No, guys, the whole point is to have fun. I always talk about, Chad, you hear me say this, especially with a lot of our younger students, art should be fun. It should be fun. Now, can it be frustrating? Sure. Can it be challenging? Absolutely. but I think it should be fun. You should be having fun when you do it. And that's one of the cool things about these sessions, Chad. You and I get to sit here and work together, and I think we have a lot of fun. And I hope that you guys are having fun listening to us and chatting with us and learning some different techniques and doing some fun things. It's a blast. It's a lot of exciting times, and we're really excited to see some of the guests that we've got lined up and some of the things that we're going to be doing. But ultimately, it's just a fun time. And I think art should be fun. And I'm grateful that we get to have a lot of fun together. Well, I'm going to I'm going to take my camera off since we've only got a minute or two. I'm going to show you guys where I'm currently at. See what you guys think. Take this camera off here. Put this like this for you guys. And so there's that messed up floor that we're talking about. But take a look at the pants.
From that, honestly,
say what?
From that view, you can't even see that it's messed up. That's one of those where you see it, but we don't see it. So fine, you're doing great.
Oh, thanks, bud. I agree with you. I know that, but again, knowing it and then convincing yourself of it is a whole different thing. But now there's some of the subtleties, so you guys can kind of see. I'll show you. So I've added a lot more vibrancy and chroma to this sweater. And so it's got a lot more form to it. It's got a lot more low lights, tones, and shades, which makes the highlights really pop. It's this coral, peachy coral, and it really stands out. Now, I'm excited to see how that affects with her face, but then I've started dropping in. You can barely see it, but there's like a bluish, it's almost like a Payne's gray. There's like a Payne's gray back there in those shelve units, which are creating the depth. If you look, it's creating the depth between the foreground molding and the reset shelved areas, right? It's actually, you can get a good sense of scale there, guys, so you can kind of see compared to my hand. But that's where I'm at there. And I've also included, now I don't typically use a black. So this is a darker glaze that's got a little bit of blue in it. And this blue is mixing in with my raw umber and my glazes. And you can see that it's pushed some of those areas back even more, right? You can see that that's really receding some of those areas. And so these glazes, I'll continue to build them and continue to push them. But ultimately, I'm going to step back, see if I can get a little bit further away, see if I can get the whole painting in here. I don't know if it's something that you guys can see, but that's most of the painting in. So once I drop in those flesh tones, I think the flesh tones, right, the skin and everything else like that, it's really going to start to come together. Now, I'm a little nervous about that because typically I like to do flesh tones with a lot of variety in it, right, Chad? Like I like to add in greens and yellows and some violets. And so with the glazing and everything, I'm curious to see how I can pull this off. I've got a couple of elements that I'm going to wrap up and tighten up on her face and her foot. Some areas that Thomas has kind of coached me through and reminded me to kind of rework and kind of redevelop. Which it's always great to have an extra set of eyes that you trust, right, Chad? You and I talking about our different pieces together. Thomas always kind of helping me through it. Even my brother sometimes is a phenomenal critic. And it's a great time to kind of reevaluate your works. So I know I've got a couple of things I'm going to tighten up, work on, but then I'm really going to tackle those features on this flesh tones because here's the reality, and I truly believe this. If I wait too long to do the flesh tones, the rest of the values, the rest of the colors, the chroma, will be affected by not having it there. It's like having a solid white background when you have a whole bunch of colors, right? It makes a difference. So I've got to drop in and start trusting myself to go into that so that I can see how those flesh tones are affected. Because if I don't, everything else is going to be affected by that.
And you talked a little bit about when you eventually get into the face and with the skin tones, and you can do the glaze, and then can't you just go back in and add some other colors to it, to give it that variety like you were talking about, right? Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. You can go thicker, right? That's that thick over thin. And so then you can build thicker with heavier paint, heavier thickness, fatty mediums, right? The fat over the lean, and then I can add some of that in. So the glaze is only the beginning, right? That glaze is only the beginning. I don't have to be stuck to that. And so that's what I'm hoping. But I'm hoping that once I put that glaze in, it'll give me a foundational color. It'll give me those values, right? Because the grisaille will provide some value structure. But then I can come in and really clamp in. For instance, her eyes, my daughter has these crystal blue eyes, right? And so I want those to really pop because to me, that's the essence of this painting, right? Is that look in her face, that look in her eye. And so that will be a heavy pigment. That will be a heavy paint, very thick, very strong, that I'm going to go in and wrap that up. And I'm starting to see it. I've got some pinks and some blues and some yellows and oranges in the pants, which are really starting to come together. I'm really pretty happy with that. And the colors are really starting to pop. So I'm at the point now where if I don't start putting in some value on the flesh, I've just got these gray areas that are standing out way too much. I've got to start unifying all my colors, or else I'm going to be making poor decisions, right? I'm going to be making decisions that aren't unifying my piece from a color palette standpoint. So that's where I'm at, guys. Chad, how you feeling about yours? We're getting ready to wrap up here, but how you feeling about your piece?
I'm feeling pretty good. I think I am going to go mostly with charcoal and then go back in and tighten some areas up, but I'll give you a closer look. My goal today was to get all the way up into the corner, and so I'm pretty close. As you can see, I put a few marks there in the corner. But yeah, I just started working some of those boulders there. You can see where it's, when you get up close, it looks a little more abstract, a little bit looser with the charcoal. But then when you pull back, then it really looks like defined, lots of boulders and that kind of thing. So this whole area will be like that. It's basically this top of this mountain is just exploding that way. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. I back out a little bit. You see the computer there, so it's hard to see the whole thing. But there's the mountainscape over there, down into the valley with the lightning storm, and then this mountain over here that's exploding and falling down. And down here, right about in this area, there's going to be a couple really tiny figures silhouetted against the highlight and in the midst of all that chaos. So,
beautiful work. Absolutely beautiful work. Thank you for sharing your process and everything with us, Chad. Ladies and gentlemen, guys, this is what this is all about, sharing techniques. As today was about sharing failures, both in the painting and then also me working through it. So I hope that was helpful. Look, that's a hard thing to do. Chad shares all of his techniques with us. We had everybody from our sculptors and our painters and our craftsmen and everything else. We want to share these techniques with you guys. We want you to be a part of it. We're so excited for you all to be a part of the VAAS live stream. Thank you guys so much for everything you do, but that's our time today. So make sure that you join us next week, next Saturday, 6 to 8 p.m., barring anything that comes up. We're going to be back live, painting, drawing, sketching, sculpting, doing anything and everything you can, and we might have a special guest, potentially. Hopefully she doesn't come in and completely roast me, but we'll see how that goes. But Chad, thank you guys so much, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful evening. If you're in the Louisville area, stay dry. It is raining like crazy out there. But Chad, anything you want to say to close us out, brother?
No, just thank you all so much. You all have a good night, a good week. We hope to see you here at the Visual Arts Academy and Studio, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, guys. Have a good evening.